Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is visiting for a second time here on Egg Spotlight. He's frequently tapped to share his opinion on Newsmax, Cheddar, and Fox Business. He's an egg economist, speaker, and the author of Food Fear, Do Business Better, and Brutal Truth. He's also the host of the podcasts Do Business Better and The Business of Agriculture. He is a wealth of information and insight for food security. And so today I'd like to welcome Damian Mason. Welcome back, Damian.
Hi, Chrissy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we
were talking before we started recording that, your listeners need to understand this, that you and I get around. We met at a Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association conference, since you are now a Floridian, in September. Then we were at World Dairy Expo. In fact, one might have been before the other. And then we also crossed paths, I think, somewhere else. But anyway, the point is, we are out here with our ear to the ground in the business of agriculture, right?
That's it. Always listening, right? All over the country. Yeah. And there are two main angles I want to look at with you today. One from the agriculture producer perspective, and then from the general population and consumer perspective. So let's start with the farmer. Farmers are, as you know very well, in a unique position. They don't control the price over their products. They don't obviously have any control over the price of their inputs. So what are you seeing in 2022 in terms of how producers are balancing high inputs, high fuel costs, but also high commodity prices?
Yeah. So this is a real issue, obviously. We have been, and you've seen my stuff, my posting on social media, we started being told that inflation was transitory a year ago. And I started calling BS on this thing. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I've never heard the word transitory. In all of my economic studies, we never even used that word. They're saying that because they want to sound a little more scholarly, is, supposed to be temporary. Oh, okay, it's temporary. Well, you know what else is temporary? Cancer. Cancer is temporary until it kills you. So everything, frankly, is temporary. Wars are temporary. Cancer is temporary. Life is temporary. If you just put a long enough horizon out there. So they kind of wanted to float this idea that this is a 1 month blip or a 2 month blip. And anybody that's actually been in business and understands how these things work is like, there's no way you can't disrupt the supply chain through shutting down manufacturing and shutting down consumption, and then expect not just for a day, for like weeks, months, several months, quarters. And so expect that somehow we're going to just bounce right back. And, the North American consumer that lives in the suburbs really believed they could just sit at home and watch Netflix and somehow everything else was just going to plow along. It's like, well, if you're not actually producing something or you're at half capacity, what do you think else is happening? So anyway, the transitory nature of this, the lie that this inflation was transitory really bothered me. And then we in ag continued to do the production, right? You can't not farm the acres. So that was important. We were essential. We were very essential. But what about the machinery that our plants were not getting their raw ingredients for? So all of a sudden, you've got a John Deere piece of equipment that doesn't have a part because the place that manufactured it was shut down, or we couldn't get something off of a cargo ship from some other country. So there became this big backlog. So obviously, these prices are not going to go down anytime soon, because we still haven't gotten caught up on the production ability. We also were caught with our pants down. Let's face it. They taught me in history, back when we still taught normal history, the United States of America has never won a war. We have never won a war. What we've always done is outproduce the competition. We didn't beat Germany. We weren't better strategists. We didn't have better generals. We had more natural resources, more ability to just outlast them, frankly. And that's where I think we got a real problem, because now we're dependent on inputs. The Russia-Ukraine thing is only the most recent iteration of this. It was inputs for the chemicals and the inert ingredients and all the stuff that we were manufacturing in China. So you've been making crap in China for a long, long time to reduce cost of production. And now when you don't produce the stuff, again, you didn't win the war. You won because you outproduced. Now we're not producing it. So who's got the upper hand? China did. Now Russia's got the fertilizer and Ukraine. So we're going to have these cost issues for a while. These cost issues The good thing is now I work with a group called Extreme Ag. That's a group of a consortium of farmers that are from different parts of the geography here in the United States. Very forward thinking, progressive, business minded farm operations. And one of my guys and I were talking about the reality. He said, I'd rather have high priced commodities along with high priced inputs versus $3 corn and low priced inputs, because I can still make money at high priced corn with high priced inputs. So let's not pretend that there's not money to be made out here, because there is. And the reality is, if we get back to being able to fix our supply, it might take a year or so, or we start manufacturing our own, or really ramp up processing and producing our own stuff here, we will probably see then a decline in the input prices. It's unlikely that they would stay this high beyond a year or two, especially if we can fix the production of those things. So I'm actually pretty positive about how things look for 2022. 2023 is going to be a matter of, can we get the stuff that we need to go to the field? That's how it looks to me.
Yeah, that's good. So how does all of this compare to what happened in the 80s? Is it
By
better then?
By the way, I want to throw another one at you, following up, Chrissy, on the last question.
Yeah.
You began it by saying farmers are in a unique position in that they are price takers. And they teach that in Agricultural Economics 101. Farmers are price takers. You sell for what the market, offers you. Now, the reality is you can control pricing a little bit. You can hedge, you can protect against losses, and you can, play the speculative market a little bit. And so, we always like to say that. And sometimes we say that in a very overly complimentary way, like, oh, these poor farmers, they just have to take whatever the price is and they can't control any of that. Well, that's not completely true. They can control it a little bit. But the other part of that is this assumes that everyone else in the world is not a price taker also. And I just want you to kind of always think about this. I've been self-employed for 28 years. I've taken what the market price is also, because I can't just say, you know what? I want to make $50 million this year. I'm just going to up my prices. Ain't nobody going to hire you. Ain't nobody going to buy your books or sponsor you or hire you for a speaking engagement because you're completely off the mark. So to say that nobody else is a price taker is kind of wrong. Ask the dry cleaners down the road. Right now, they are raising their prices, but they waited until the market kind of went along with it, right? You're hearing that now, like the grocery stores are saying, yeah, we thought we could pass along a 5% increase. ConAgra Foods, a bunch of these food companies are saying the same thing, Chrissy. Nestle, just read an article on the Wall Street yesterday. Nestle, one of the biggest processed food companies in the world, said, we are going to pass along another 5.5% price increase. So you're saying, well, that's not being a price taker. They were, until it became evident that everything else was going to jump up 5.5% and they could do the same thing. So in many regards, most businesses ultimately are price takers. They take what the market is offering or will bear. The farm situation is tougher in that a lot of times your input prices remain at one level as the output price can drop precipitously. Now, that's not happened now. We've got a really good situation for the farms here in North America, where corn's climbing to the high sevens, and soybeans are 16, new crop $16 or something. But the worst scenario is your input prices were already fixed, and then you have a precipitous decline in your price going into the harvest season. Although most business-minded farm operations set themselves up with programs and insurance packages to protect against too big of losses for that. And I think that we're going to be okay. So I think we're going to be okay in 2022. If 2023 crop prices remain good and you can lock those in and you can get your inputs bought, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good year.
That's good. So you're saying that if we compare this to all the issues in the 80s, even though this feels really bad, we're definitely in a better position.
Now, I know there's going to be some farmer that's listening to this is bristling a little bit because he's mad about something. He's going to say, damn it, that Damian Mason said that everybody else is a price taker also. Now he's going to get really mad because I'm going to say, guess what? This don't compare to the 80s, because you know what? It doesn't. If you're of a certain age, you don't even really understand the 80s. If you're of a certain age, you're probably tired of hearing your parents or grandparents talk about the 80s. I always put it in perspective very simply. And I did so in my book. I'll say it just as simple as this is not walking uphill through snowstorms both way to school. I'm not carrying on about how rough things are when I was a kid. But I will tell you, I lived through the 80s and I always was a person that paid attention. From the time I was a little boy, I read the media, watched the media, paid attention. 1981, all hell breaks loose, right? 82, 83. By about the mid 80s, there were farm assets that were so toxically bad, the banks wouldn't even take them back. And that is a true story. So if anybody ever asks you, hey, tell me about the 80s, this is a true story. Maybe not everywhere, but certainly in the Midwest where I am from, there were farm assets, Chrissy, that were so underwater, so toxically screwed up financially, the bank wouldn't even repossess them because they didn't want them on their books. That's a true story.
Wow.
So are we anywhere close to that right now? No. Couple reasons. Do we have rampant inflation? Yes. Is it transitory? Well, again, if that means temporary, cancer's temporary too until it kills you, right? So I'd say that we are in a rapid inflationary situation. I'd say it's going to probably get worse. What reminds me of 1980 right now is the ascension in land values. My parents bought a chunk of ground. We were just finally not broke for the first time in our entire existence. Former sharecropper, herdsmen, we didn't come from nothing. We were finally not broke by about the time I was 12 years old. My parents said, better buy that chunk of ground across the road, or it could be a trailer park, which never, ever happens, by the way. That's what they always used to say. I'll go to a trailer park. At 18% interest at peak land value. Within 1.5 years of that acquisition, the land was worth less than 50% of what it had been 18 months prior. So are we going to see where agricultural assets, meaning land, drops 50 to 60% 18 months from now? I don't think so, but the numbers look fairly frothy. Stupidly frothy, maybe not quite stupidly frothy, but on the verge of alarmingly frothy. Maybe that's a good way to look at it.
Right.
When something goes up, you're a smart girl, anything you're going to buy. You're sitting there in Florida saying, you know what? I want to buy 6 more fruit trees to put in my yard. I want to buy 6 more. I want to buy a car, whatever that thing is. If someone says, hey, you know what? You should buy this now because it's gone up 30% in the last 14 months. And if you don't buy it now, it might go up another 30%. And then are you really behaving rationally, or are you behaving more frightened? Are you behaving more out of fear? And that's where I think the inflation thing hurts folks. The farm operator says, crap, I turned down that farm down the road. It went up for auction for $9,000 an acre and here in Indiana, and now it's worth $11,800. I can't keep doing this. I'm going to have. So then it becomes this fear of missing out, if you will, the old FOMO, fear of missing out and not getting in. And so we sometimes get a little irrational. That reminds me a bit of the 80s, where there was a run on agricultural land purchases. We don't have 18% interest. We do have a more manageable debt. And a lot of folks would say, oh, that's great. You mean as long as interest is 5.5 or 6% and it's not 18, I can't get hurt. Well, remember, debt's still debt and it has to be serviced. And so there's an important consideration there. If just because you think your cash position or your asset position is good, look ahead 2 and 3 years from now and say, can I service that debt? For instance, my parents did it because me and my brother worked really, really hard at keeping that farm going. And my dad was able to get back on his railroad job in 1985 because he had been laid off because the railroad was just as bad as the ag market was. And because of his off-farm income, we were able to climb out of that. So I guess that would be the one thing I would look at. Do we compare to the 80s? Land values seem a little bit alarmingly frothy. And there's a little bit of irrational behavior maybe on buying, but I don't think there's irrational behavior on the farmers in terms of the production. I mean, they're really being diligent about their inputs and they're being very judicious about their spend on the things that they know are in short supply. So that's a good balance.
Yeah, that's good. And then kind of getting into the land values a little bit more in the Corn Belt, it's been reported that price increases this year over last are around 18%. Is that a little bit conservative, do you think?
Yeah. So the Chicago Fed released, it was right around New Year's,
Mhm.
meaning like here we are recording this at the end of April of 2022. So about a full 4 months ago almost, they said 18% year in the year 2021. I'd say that there was another 10 to 20% that came after that. And so I mean, I'm certainly they probably got numbers and so you're going to say, well, some of my stuff is anecdotal versus a complete statistical analysis. But and of course, the big sales always make the headlines that some farm in Illinois sold for $24,000 an acre, whatever. But it looks to me like it's more like 30%. And you know what, Grizzly, that might be the way it should be. When I say it's alarmingly frothy, I'm talking to you right now from my winter house in Arizona. I'll be going back to my Indiana farm here next week. Um, but I keep up with all this stuff, including my neighborhood in Arizona. And a Fox Business story this morning when my wife's drinking coffee and I'm talking to her about the day's activities has a story about real estate. Arizona real estate is up 32.9%.
Yeah.
Florida, down where you are, depending, Tampa, I think was the one they referenced, was up 31% or something like
Yeah.
this. So this could be a function that everything that involves dirt or bricks or mortar might be up at these big numbers, but
Yeah.
they are definitely unsustainable. Article that I read a month ago said the average one bedroom apartment in the United States of America had increased in its rent in the last 12 months. So this is 1 month ago. In the
Mhm.
last 12 months, the average one bedroom apartment, 25%. So you got one bedroom apartments at 25%. My neighborhood in Arizona, 32%. And the farms down the road in Indiana, up what looks to me like 30%. So it could just be that this is where everything is. But can it sustain that? Could it just stay there? That's fine if it just stays there. If it keeps going, it looks to me like it's going to be too irrational. Is it likely to stay there? Most charts don't go straight up. They go up and they have a down, they go up and have a down. So, what would
Yeah.
be the reason that agricultural real estate would go down? Well, of course, interest rates, what everybody talks about. There's the other part of this that makes me think that they will not. They will maybe not continue to go up, but they will maybe not go down much. There's a boatload of cash sitting around. Um, I have people that I know that ask me about farmland investment, and that usually tells me, "Oh, we're a little long in the tooth." When my suburban friends in Phoenix are asking me how they could buy farm ground in Indiana, it tells me, "Oh, time to peel out of this."
Yeah.
But there's a boatload of money, and if you're not that heavily leveraged and you're using a lot of we didn't even have any farm programs last year, Chrissy, here in the United States to speak of. We have farm
Yeah.
programs every year, but there was no huge bailout. 2020, the federal government gave $51 billion to America's farm belt, to American farmers. There was not anything like that in 2021, but the cash position was still good. The non-farm real estate buyer is also sitting on cash. According to the Wall Street, most homes in the United States, most households in the United States, their cash position improved, their financial position improved with all of the given money for if you had a kid or giving you stimulus money, giving you all these things. So it looks like the cash position is pretty good. But
Mhm.
at chicken, you go to the grocery and your chicken's 14% more and your Wheaties are 18% more and the bread is up 21%. It don't take long until the household's money position becomes way less healthy just by going to the grocery and the gas station and everything else that a person does. So kind of we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really intriguing to listen and watch and see what's going on. And here, like you said, with housing, we're just outside of Fort Myers. And in this city, the property values they're saying have gone up 34%, but 45% of people that bought here in this city in the last year paid cash. 45%. So that's so interesting because there's not going to be, the housing crisis here
Well,
anyway.
that's the exact thing that I guess you really got to look at is, and it's kind of that way, Chrissy. Most of these places are saying that on new home, or I'm sorry, existing home sales here in the Phoenix metro area. And again, I know that your listeners are saying, hey, we're the North American ag spotlight. Why are they telling us? Well, because there is a correlation. There is absolutely a correlation. Now, sometimes the correlation is inverse. Out here in Phoenix Metro, because obviously I've always been an Arizona winter kind of guy, as best I could. 19, I'm sorry, in the year 2006, things were plowing along, going up 20% year over year. And I remember saying, yeah, it's not time to buy out there. It's time to, and I didn't have a place at that point. And then the bottom fell out 08, then 9, then 10. And again, it was, went through this whole thing. But the position of many buyers was that they were on 0% mortgages, 3% down. And so if your place, loses $100,000 and you paid 200 for it, it's obviously a problem when you also didn't put anything down. In the agricultural real estate situation, anytime that I have bought farms ground, I've had to put up a minimum of 30%. So I guess there you go. If you did buy farm property and you put 30% down, and we just said that we think farm ground has gone up around, say, 30% in the last 16 months, it drops 30%, which is probably unlikely given the amount of interest that ag has right now. You'd still be back to break even, right? You'd be back to even in terms of, what you're in it for. Then it becomes a matter of, can you keep paying for it? And, then there's rent rates and all these kinds of things. But in general, I don't think we're going to see a big washout and like foreclosures and 1980s kind of thing. I do see that we should level off. I see we should level off because usually other asset classes make farmland less exciting, right? Right now, there's all kinds of people chasing this. They've read that Bill Gates owns 250,000 acres, and they think that there's some reason to be in this. And there's people calling me wanting to get in it. And there's even now investment groups, right, where you can give $100,000 to some group, and essentially they'll buy into farm ground, and you'll be a fractional ownership. So that doesn't amount to that much of the market, but it is a little bit of it. Looks to me like we're going to be fine. I don't see a big, huge correction downward. I could see a little one. But it seems like there's too much cash hanging around. And that's across the board. Like you said, your neighborhood in Florida and my neighborhood in Arizona, and then also the entire state of Iowa.
Right.
But you know what? The question is then, if we do have a downturn, what happens? Who's going to get hurt, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's usually always the person that's over leveraged.
Yeah.
Just because you have a bunch of assets, again, if you can't cash flow it, if you still have to pay a mortgage on that property and your farm income or your rent, if you happen to be just a landlord, does not cover it, then you go to your pocket for the balance, right? And so that's where the whole issue came about in the 1980s. You lost 70% of the value, or 55 or 60% of the value, and then also the income off of it dropped by half. So you were sunk both ways, and the debt you were obligating was at 18%. So in hindsight, it's like, well, hell yes, this was going to happen.
Right.
How could it not?
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think about Amazon buying up prime farmland and putting up solar panels? Amazon doesn't do anything that doesn't make sense from a business perspective. So how on earth are solar panels more valuable than producing good farmland? What's going on?
Yeah, so you've been watching my commentary about this in my home county in Indiana. And I personally know at least one of the farm owners that is selling, and I believe I know a few of them that are going to take this deal. They're not selling, they're going to rent it. First was made aware about this whole solar thing about 4 years ago. I was a speaker at the Illinois Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers Association meeting. And I sat in on another session while I was there, and it was about the solar leases, what was coming. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm in like Springfield, Illinois in February. The sun has not been out since sometime in October. Why are we talking about solar in Illinois? It's great during the growing season to grow corn, but why are we thinking about putting solar panels out here? And then I found out why. The presenter, this gal, was talking about the leases that she had been setting up, and this was again 4 or 5 years ago. And she says, so right now it looks like the number is $400 per acre per year cash rent. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, okay, even here in Illinois, pretty good rent rates. Let's say they were getting, I don't know, 250, something like that back then. I'm like, wow, you're talking, three times, more than three times, 3.2x what you would get it if you rented it. This is crazy. So I stayed for that whole session. Then I read a couple of articles. Then it turns out solar starts coming to Indiana and it's closer to my backyard. And in fact, now there's going to be at least one, but it looks like a couple solar farms in my home county. Now, my concern with this is multiple. Uh, how could something be this profitable that in a place, and you're from Buffalo, for God's sakes, you know what I'm talking about, an area that does not get sun for multiple months of
Yeah.
the year. How could we get enough energy, enough BTUs or kilowatts or whatever measurement you want to use out of solar panels in a place that doesn't get sun for much of the year? And it's enough that you could justify not just putting it on the roofs of your warehouse, but going down the road and telling a farm owner, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 times what you would get if you just rented it to me to produce soybeans to put solar panels out there. The math seems very difficult for me to comprehend. Now, I've had people say, oh, well, if 1 acre of solar panels generates this much, then this, and this. I'm like, well, there's a couple of ifs there. What if again, we are talking about versus actual crop production, those numbers maybe don't make sense. There's one big concern. I think it's a threat to our food autonomy. If you view food as national security, by the way, the reason it makes money is if you look at it, Amazon's doing this for the tax incentives, the tax breaks, and obviously to go out and appeal to all of their shareholders and customers and say, we care about the environment. And the average person that's online right now adding stuff to their basket on Amazon doesn't have two hoots in hell about how food is produced. All they know is they heard this. Amazon gets its power from solar. The fact that it also went out and blanketed farmland with solar panels is lost on them. And then I would say this other thing. So first off, I think that our tax dollars and our national energy policy is flawed in that we're rewarding that. Mm-hmm. If we want to use resources we have without gobbling up our acres, which produce our food, again, you'd have a hard time arguing against the coal that we have 400 to 600 years worth of it in the ground. Natural gas, we've got hundreds of years of that. We've got hundreds of years of oil, and we've got still the option for nuclear. So that's a concern of mine. The windmills take up a little bit of room on these farms and provide a source of income, but they at least make it so you can still farm around them. You can't do it with solar panels. What happens to those solar panels when they're done? There's another thing. If we're playing an environmental game here, what happens to those solar panels when they're done? But I want to throw another concept out there. We already know that places like where I'm from, Indiana, are really good at making corn and soybeans, not so good necessarily at making solar because it ain't sunny a bunch of the time. My part of the world does not need irrigation. I think water is going to be the new environmental concern 10 and 20 years from now. Look at California, it's already the issue there now. If we can produce crops without using any irrigation, that's another reason we've got great soils, we've got great ability to produce, and we don't need water. And now where are we shifting production to? That's a concern from an environmental standpoint. Why did we not put these solar panels in the deserts of Nevada? Yeah. And the person would say, well, you want that energy close to where it's being consumed. Like, well, there's a town called Las Vegas. It consumes a lot of electricity. Yeah. So, I think there's a misguided environmentalism there.
Yeah. Yeah. You fly out to the West Coast and there's a lot of ground there that there's nothing. You can look for 25 minutes and not see anything down there.
So let's look at the other net effect of that, Chrissy. Those solar panels, if someone comes to you, you own whatever it is, 100 acres there. And you got a farmer down the road that's giving you $250 an acre case rent, let's say. And he produces soybeans and corn. And then Mr. Solar Developer comes up and bangs on the door and says, I'm going to give you $1,000 an acre. You, as a smart person, are going to say, hey, farmer, I like you. And, but they're going to give me 1,000. And he says, oh, man, you're squeezing me, but I'll go to 300. You say, you're still 300 versus 1,000. 1,000 wins every day. Now, there are not rent escalators, is my understanding on these. If they are, they're minuscule. In an era where there's 10% inflation like we're looking at right now, if that thousand don't keep escalating and we have this transitory inflation stick around for another 10 to 20 years, that $1,000 an acre lease to the solar people isn't going to look quite as shiny. Um, Another concern I would have is because right now it's not a lot of acres. Right now, it's not a lot of acres. There's say 13.5 million acres of cropland in my home state of Indiana, I think is the number. I'd have to look it up. I'm going on memory right now. And if you blanket over, I don't know, 10 or 20,000, 30,000 acres, you're saying as a percentage, this ain't very much. Well, you're right. That's true. So maybe I shouldn't be concerned. There's a few reasons that, again, I'm concerned. It's false environmentalism because what happens to all those panels? A. B, where were those panels made? Oh, wait a minute. We're talking about our independence. We're talking about our autonomy. We took away acres that make us food independent and then made us energy dependent on a foreign country like China, which is our enemy, or soon will be. The other part of that thing is it props up land values, and it's going to actually be farmer negative. If you gave me $1,000 an acre when I was getting $250 before that, I'm like, I got a whole bunch of new money. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to go down the road and bid up farm ground because I like owning farm ground. And then I'm going to probably outbid somebody else because I have this new inflated revenue source that they don't. My purchase didn't have to make sense based on corn and soybeans. It made sense because I'm getting a whole bunch of money from solar. It's going to be a distortion to the marketplace on land rents and land values.
That's it. And that's logical. And not even to mention how much carbon it took to get those panels from China. So
sure. And then as far as the carbon sequestration, a field of corn really pulls a lot of carbon out of the air. And those panels don't. And underneath those panels, it's going to be some vegetation, but how much? So it's a bit of an environmental shell game, and it's also coming at a bad time, Chrissy. Right now, our energy prices, what you pay the electric company, is certainly going up more than 7.5%. I'm going to tell you. So again, energy prices are going up at an outsized proportion compared to what they tell us the inflation rate is. So I think that it distorts a lot of markets right here. And it's federal policy that's doing this. You can say, well, Amazon's doing this on their own. Well, again, they're doing it because there's a certain amount of appeal and a certain amount of compliance and a certain amount of also tax and government benefit that they're going to get from it.
Definitely, that makes sense. And pivot a little bit to another big issue for farmers, and that's labor. So according to, let me just find it here. There's a June 2021 Ag Barometer from Purdue University. 66% of survey respondents said that they had some or a lot of difficulty securing enough labor. So that is up from 30% the previous year. So it's getting bad. What is the fallout going to be from this labor challenge on farm?
We were ahead as an industry. We were ahead of the labor challenge before everybody else. Everybody else started getting into it a couple of years ago because the government tossed out billions and said, hey, you're out of work, or we shut your company down. We told you stay home. Here's some money. And then a bunch of those folks said, I can make more money by sitting at home versus going and waiting tables. And whether a lot of folks, particularly with the current administration, tried to deny that was the reality, but let's face it, that's the reality. You give a waitress $800 or $990, I think was what she made in Indiana, to sit at home versus what you might make by waiting tables, which would be about half that. You're going to probably sit at home. So anyway, we were ahead of this because we tend to have lower, and this is in no way in bashing on anybody, we tend to have lower skilled labor needs in agriculture. We need people to pick apples, to cut cauliflower. And you're not talking about semi-skilled or even skilled. You're not talking about an electrician. You're not talking about a plumber's apprentice where they actually spend a year really learning about measuring and cutting pipe and all this. You're talking about going out and whacking off some celery. No offense, we need those people. We need those jobs. We need that celery. We need that cauliflower. So the hell of it is we've been at this for a while because we tend to have a lower skilled, lower paid labor need. And we need lots of it. And we also need it seasonally a lot of times. And we need it in rural areas commonly. So you're not talking about being on the fringes of a big metro area. commonly you're talking about a more rural area. So we've been fighting this for a while. The quick and easy answer, of course, is to automate. That's what's usually happened. I worked in a factory for my teen years when I was putting myself through Purdue. And I can tell you that there would be a job that got replaced. There had been a man that did this, moving some ceiling tile around that maybe got automated. Well, first off, eventually you can't automate everything. There's a lot of stuff that's difficult to automate. And sometimes with automation comes improvements, but in the short term, you sometimes lose efficiency. And so what I'm hearing now, your home state, Florida, there's some strawberry producers that are experimenting with mechanical harvesting. And right now it's about 50% efficient, meaning it leaves 50% of strawberries in the field. What if that, instead of saying, you know what, let's wait till we perfect it. What if they say, I'd rather get 50% than none because I can't even get any workers to show up here. So talk about food waste. Now, if the sacrifice is, it's going to cost me $48 an hour to get somebody to come here and pick strawberries, this machine might waste half of my strawberries, but damn it, I got to get something out of this field. And it's still cheaper to waste half the strawberries than to hire somebody. That could be a real thing. Generally, automation has improved efficiency. Look at using milkers, milking machines like we have on the dairy farm I was raised versus going out there and squeezing Bessie's teats. So we might have that real issue. We are going to be squeezed harder, I think, in agriculture because, again, we don't have the numbers. We haven't had those numbers for a long time. I'm not sure we can automate fast enough. We've been calling for a long time for a guest worker program. In general, the government has turned a blind eye to what happens because certainly a lot of people know that on our livestock farms and our produce farms, we might have illegal immigrant labor out there, but you go and shake them down too much, you ain't gonna have any food in the grocery store. This has been an issue for a long time. And frankly, I think it gets worse. I think it's worse as we move forward.
Yeah. So
what's the answer?
Considering all of this, what should farmers be doing now to either brace, to get ready? What should they be doing?
Yeah. Generally, and this is a tough deal. We've always looked at it as almost contract type labor, and I'm not in any way being mean, but let's just go across the board. It's like, yeah, we got these people and here's what we do. Okay. Now we house them. That's always been kind of a thing. What if we truly have to set up a more competitive hiring environment? I mean, this really might be coming, and I think that it is. Whereas instead we just look at it like, in some of the big cities, and I'm in no way being mean, if I just wanted 5 people to be laborers on a roofing job, I could drive up to Home Depot, and then there will be folks, they may be from Nicaragua or Guatemala, wherever, hanging out at the Home Depot at 6 a.m. And I say, I need 5. And this is a true thing that happens. And a lot of your listeners and people in rural America maybe don't know that that's what happens, but that's what happens. And you can go to the Home Depot here in North Phoenix and see it. Trust me, I see it. Well, we're kind of that way also in ag. And the reality is, what if we have to get a little more competitive, a little more inviting? And let's just throw out a concept here. Much of our immigration right now is from Latin America. And what if we said, man, this is tough. I can't get anybody to come out here and do this work. We got the guest visa and the H-2As and all that. But what if it's like a livestock operation? Well, what if you say, hey, it's not just the money. There's the money. And then there's maybe the housing. And then there's what about, you know what? I'm going to make sure you have Sunday off because I know that you're religious and you're very family oriented. What if we're going to make sure that we do stuff to value your family, or we have childcare? You couldn't even imagine these things, but what if, and you're saying, well, only a big farming operation can do that. True. But what's happening in agriculture anyhow? We're consolidating. So maybe the answer is that we're going to have to look more like a real corporate employer 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. We're either going to be all automated. We're going to be you as the operator and your spouse, sister, brother, whatever, or we're going to look more like a corporate business where you've got some family programs and you've got some childcare. That could actually be coming to agriculture.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That's pretty cool. I like that idea.
Well, of course, you're going to say that adds cost. Well, it does, but
if they
it's
show
either
up.
well, it's either that or you're leaving 50% of the strawberries in the field, right? I mean, I think
Yeah. Yeah,
that's the
that's
tough
it.
part. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to have less of the pick up five guys at Home Depot mentality and more of the you're here
Mhm.
for the long haul mentality. Here's how we work. This is the lodging situation. This is the childcare situation. There's this, and this. And I think that's probably what's going to end up happening. And again, it does add cost, but what's not having the labor to produce your product cost you?
Yeah, that's it. And what would your advice be to companies that serve farmers, so manufacturers, for example? Should they be expecting producers then, taking everything that we've talked about into account? Will they be making big purchases at year end or into next year? Or are they going to be more conservative because of the fear of these rising interest rates?
Remember, farmers are famous for doing tax avoidance versus tax planning. Oh crap! This sure had a big year. We're gonna buy a combine. Well, then what if there aren't any combines? Because now we got the
Yeah,
supply disruption that's going on.
like last year.
Um, and there's going to be somebody that's being a critic out there that's going to say, well, he doesn't know anything. Got a farm on paper, but he's not got millions of dollars worth of machinery, and that's true. I don't. I have about $60,000 worth of machinery, so I'm not in their position. That's true. Um, what do I think is going to happen? The manufacturers of big ticket items generally have always looked at thing as like, yeah, is the farm belt making money? Boy, we're going to sell stuff. And then we were overproduced for a while. I remember doing a speech for the Montana Farm Equipment Association, and the person from Case IH was there and said they had enough combines to, satisfy 2.5 years worth of demand already built. But now we get into a different situation. This was a decade ago. Now we don't
Yeah.
have enough combines to satisfy demand. So what to expect? I think that the Farm Belt is going to buy about everything they can because if they held off a little bit, and it's my understanding when I talk to my machinery people that machinery is obviously better, more efficient, and if you can get it available, then it's got the demand. So I'd say that's going to be all right. Inputs, you're going to be judicious about using stuff like fertilizer with it being so expensive, but you can't live without it. We already know that you can't even get chicken litter in my part of Indiana because folks tried to use all that they could as a means of manure and fertilizer and nutrient management. Are big tickets going to sell? I'd say yes, because here's what's really remarkable. If you look at historically, we've had like super cycles. 1920s, things were really good in rural America.
Yeah.
I think it was the 20s. I wasn't alive. Post World War II, got this burgeoning population. You got industrialization, suburbs going crazy. Then you got 5 kids, baby boom, they got to eat. Things got really good there. Then we had, so you're talking 40s. And then you had, things got good in the 70s, late 70s. Things were pretty good. Mid late 70s, things were really good in agriculture. And then 1981 came along. We didn't see a good cycle then from 81 until beginning about 06, 05,
Mhm.
06. And things climbed it for about 7 to 8 years, 2013 being the high water mark. Then all hell broke loose. Well, 80, 80 to 2006, you're talking about what, 25, 30 years there. We just went from 2013 to 2021. Things were pretty good last year, right? So that's only 8 years. We almost jumped. We almost jumped. We had a super cycle and then we are having another one. Are we going to have another one now? 2021 was really darn good. 2022 is going to be good. There's pockets that will struggle, maybe tree fruit or something, but in general, most of agriculture is going to do really well. And it looks like you can probably look ahead and say, if we can get the stuff, we're going to be okay. Is this another super cycle? Is this another big boom time? It looks like it could be. What's going to upset the apple cart? External forces. There's another thing that's going to happen. It appears to me, Chrissy, we are deglobalizing. Um, for people your age, my age, it's all been about globalization. When you were a little kid, or I was a little kid, and I was hearing about this Vietnam War, and I was just
Yeah.
a little boy about going to kindergarten when that Vietnam War ended. Did you ever think that then 30 years later, you would put on a shirt and the tag would say made in Vietnam? Well, that's the effect of globalization. And it's done great things for Asia's economic development. It's done great things for the American consumer. You go to Walmart and a shirt is $6. Hell, they were $6 when I was a little kid. But what if now we're seeing deglobalization? Ukraine, Russia, China wants to take over Taiwan. Four countries want us to be blown up. Iran, North Korea, arguably China, and probably Russia would like us to not exist.
Yeah.
The response has been to pull back. And so, what will deglobalization? This is my last big thought to leave with your listeners. I know I've talked too long. What will deglobalization do? Well, manufacturing has to come home. Products might get more expensive, but they'll be available, right? We never want a war. We just outproduce the competition. So by golly, we better have some glyphosate being made here in Houston instead of Shanghai. What are those other effects? We'll have supply. We'll be talking less about how much of our soybean crop goes to China, perhaps 10 years from now. I don't know. So that's going to be the big thing for us to navigate, I think, moving forward is what happens in a less globalized world for agriculture. Does machinery get more expensive? Do we make more of it here? Does it may become less expensive? Do we make it last longer? Does it become, you know what? Does it become to where, like I've always said, it becomes more like we don't even own it. We start going like with the more Uber concept because of some of these things. I see a lot of changes going on. I'm wondering if deglobalization is going to be the one that changes our behavior. I don't know yet. I just read that less farmers' CRP contracts are being accepted, and I'm wondering if there's now this realization in Washington D.C. Oh crap, we better stop taking farm ground out of production because our grain stocks are pretty skinny. China's hoarding grain. Russia is refusing to sell any grain. Again, this is what deglobalization looks like. It becomes very self-reliant.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even my manufacturers I'm talking to are saying, "Oh yeah, we found a way to source parts here. We found a way. We're not bringing things in from China anymore. Yeah, it costs a little bit more, but yeah." So I'm totally seeing what you're saying there for sure.
Well, yeah, the chips.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a bunch of these little things that the average person didn't even know about it, right? They didn't
yeah,
know. You and I probably knew that a bunch of ag chemicals were made some other country, India, China, whatever, and it made sense for a long time to offshore because of cost of production. Well, when you don't get the stuff and you need it, cost of production is a secondary point.
yeah. That's it for sure. And uh, another question, a little bit broader.
I thought we were
Agriculture.
going to wrap it up. I don't want to wear out
We're
your listeners.
almost done.
You get me going. I don't know why it is. You just get me all wound up here.
I know it's could just go on forever. It's all so interesting. But you talk a lot about national security and agriculture going hand in hand. And so what changes need to be made at the national level to bolster that relationship and
Yeah,
protect it?
well, first off, right now it seems that our federal government doesn't mind an impervious southern border, and maybe it's because deep down they think it's good for us to have a lot of illegal immigrants here because we need the labor. I'm not sure it's been that well thought out. I think it's more just a plan to bring in voters, and there's going to be people that bristle at that, saying I'm getting political. Well, you tell me why it would make sense to us for us to have an impervious southern border at a time when right now the world's a dangerous place. So I'm reluctant to give too much credit to anybody in Washington, D.C., I don't care on which side of the fence you're talking about, at actually being able to address what our problems are. Our problems, it's really not our problems, it's our, shall we say, vulnerabilities. We have some really skinny grain stocks right now. And our problem has generally been surplus, right? We propped up prices during the 90s with things called the LDP, loan deficiency payment, because we had stockpiles of stuff, which is a good problem to have. You know, it's better to manage for surplus than to manage for deficiencies, right? So if you've got that, that's a good problem. Well, we don't have a lot of surplus right now, and we're doing a lot of stupid things. Like I said, these humans do what they're incentivized to do. Okay. Just like when you pay the waitress $990 a week and she don't have to work, she's probably going to do exactly what you paid her to do, not work. Well, markets work this way. Humans do what they're incentivized to do. If we're being incentivized to put solar panels on top of perfectly good farm ground that doesn't need irrigation, that has really good deep topsoils and is very productive, well, unfortunately, you're going to go with the economic incentive. Right now, it seems like we don't have enough economic incentive to, or at least understanding that we should build economic incentive to get back the surpluses and also keep food inexpensive. I saw that Joe Biden this morning was on talking about her Psaki, which basically she talks for him all the time. Kind of reminds me, Chrissy, like they always talk about a sister that always talks, and then the little brother never learns to talk because she answers all the questions for him. That's about what we got going on in Washington, D.C. right now. Jen Psaki is the older sister that does all the talking for the brother that doesn't have to talk. Anyway, she was talking about all the money they're going to spend to make things more affordable. That's usually not worked.
Doesn't work with the family budget, does it?
Yeah, throwing more money out there into the system hasn't typically made things more affordable. So we got this real concern there. And again, food. United States Department of Agriculture was founded in the 1860s, signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln, who called it the People's Department. I've talked about this a lot. The People's Department, meaning it was all about safe, abundant, and affordable food for the masses. And that has been the cornerstone of America's greatness, is that we had food covered. Now you go and invent Google. We got food covered. Now you go over there and invent the assembly line and build some Model Ts. We got food covered. Right now, it don't look like we have food covered. Right now, it don't look like we have food covered because of the supply that we're going to need, of the inputs that we're going to need to go to our fields. It doesn't look like we have ag covered because we aren't sitting on enough stockpile. It doesn't look like we have ag covered because we're not protecting ourselves as well as these other countries that are our enemies are using food as a weapon, or using food as a bargaining chip, or using food stockpiles as military preparedness. It doesn't look like we have food covered right now. So we need some changes in Washington, D.C. about how we view food as national security. No question.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. I'm pretty sure we could probably go on. I could talk to you for about 3 hours on the same topic and we wouldn't run out. But I guess got to let you go. Have the rest of your day. So where can people find you? Where can they buy your books?
Sure thing. Go to DamianMason.com, DAMIAN, DamianMason.com, and you can find all my stuff there. My books, my podcast, The Business of Agriculture, which Chrissy so graciously mentioned. We got 240 episodes out now, so there's plenty of good stuff for you to look back and find there. You can even, if you want to get your entrepreneur side going, check out Do Business Better, the book or the podcast. You can check out videos of me, like Chrissy said. I've been on some news media. You can look at some of my interviews there. And if you're really bored, you can watch some videos of me on stage talking. And if you decide, what the heck, I've got a conference coming up, well, then you can also give us a shout and I can come and speak at your conference, because I speak at a lot of ag conferences. And that's kind of how Chrissy and I met.
That's right. Yeah. And it's pretty good. Makes you think and laugh. Those are the best, if you can think and laugh while you're watching somebody at a conference. For sure.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yep. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's watching or listening. If you want to learn more, we're going to provide all the links in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Egg Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or Egg Fuse channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.